Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Hagan, and this is another episode of Nxt In Sales, a Next Level podcast. I am so excited to introduce you guys to my guest today. I have Rob Consoli with me, and he is the Chief Revenue Officer over at Element. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Anna.
Of course. Well, Rob and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but I would love if you could give a little background on yourself so our viewers can get to know you before we dive right in.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. It's been great to get to know you as well. So again, I'm Rob Consoli. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Element. We're a secure communication and collaboration platform that's based on the Matrix Foundation open source software. And so what we allow you to do is, if you think about Slack or Teams, we allow you to have end-to-end encryption, messaging, voice, any kind of communication that you want to have securely, and it can be either on-prem or in the cloud. So our customers really like that. We're principally being used today in a lot of public sector opportunities where protecting that data is pretty important, and also expanding into the commercial world as well.
That's amazing. What an important product that's coming about, especially just, people are so concerned about the privacy of their data, and rightfully so. So I was super excited to have Rob on today. You've helped build out a lot of sales teams, and I'm curious, when you're hiring for those sales teams, what attributes and characteristics are you looking for in your team members?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anna. And I think, if I think about my passions in my career, maybe I should just give a little bit of backdrop about how I got here and why I'm a chief revenue officer. I'm not your typical sales leader, if you will. I'm a former aerospace engineer, application developer, and I fell into sales, really. I became a pre-sales engineer. Then I got enamored with, hey, what would this look like if I was on the other side of the wall actually doing the selling? Became a salesperson, then a sales leader, and ultimately as chief revenue officer. And I've been at this now for about 30 years. So my principles about the 5 things that I look for, if you will, in hiring are a lot of lessons learned over the years about what makes good salespeople and makes good talent, bringing them into the company. And so there's 5 things that I live and die by in terms of the hiring process. And while some of them might sound a little, cliche-ish, I'll try to get into some detail why that's important. First and foremost, number 1 for me is integrity. I want to hire men and women of integrity. I want people to be able to do what they say they're going to do. I want them to be truth tellers in everything they do. I know for me personally, I aspire to be a truth teller, both personally and professionally, in everything I do. And frankly, it's a real differentiator, sadly, in sales, to have people that actually tell you what the product does and don't lie or mislead customers just to get a sale. And so it starts there. How do I detect that? I can just tell that by really looking at your resume, looking at your background, looking at your LinkedIn profile, asking you some questions during the interview process. So it starts there. The second one's probably not much of a surprise. It's intellect. I don't expect people to come in and know everything about the product or platform that they're going to be working with me to sell, but I do expect them to be intellectually curious and wanting to learn new technologies and so forth. And so I often ask them, what's your learning style? Is it by memorization or is it by application? I tend to lean toward people that are more hands-on in application, particularly in a high-tech world. Integrity coupled with that intellect together really gives us a huge competitive advantage. The third thing I look for are people that have a really strong work ethic. And what do I mean by that? They're self-starters. They may have owned their own business at one time or done something, early in their career that was more entrepreneurish, but basically, they don't need to be told what to do. I'm not a micromanager. They get up every day. They know what they need to do. They know that sales is a numbers game. They're going to focus on the things that are important. Number 4 for me is going to be people that aspire to care about other people and not just make it about themselves. For me, it's about servant leadership. I'm not going to ask my team to do something that I wouldn't roll my sleeves up and help them do. I've been known to work nights and weekends helping to pull together that right sales presentation or that right proposal. And I really want people to be able to lead by example in the organization, no matter what role they are. And finally, I want them really to be team players. I don't often hire that one-hit wonder, that guy that says I and me all the time, that's really pounding their chest and just, elevating themselves. I look for people that want to see everyone on the team be successful. And they're often recognizing the other talent that help them get that sale or help them get that win, because it does take an army in the organization for us to be successful. So those are the 5 attributes, Anna, that I look for when I'm looking to hire people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, I listened to you you talk about these 5 different attributes, and I think, there's a pretty common theme there, and it really does tie back to that first one of integrity. And it's, can you trust this person? Can you trust that they're going to do what they say they're going to do?
Yes.
Can you trust that they're going to do the research? Can you trust that they're going to be honest with your clients?
Yes.
And I think that that's just a general theme in sales, that if you can't build trust within your team and you can't build trust within your client, there is no way that you are going to be super successful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what you touched on there is important too. It's not just telling the truth about our technology and our product that we might be selling, but we tell a client that we're going to deliver a proposal, at the end of the day, or we're going to follow up and schedule that meeting. We actually do it, because as you said, that builds the trust bond with the client. And I think we all know about sales. They're not just buying the product, they're buying you. They're buying what you're saying, and their belief in you that you're going to come through and help them deliver the solution that you told them that you would be able to deliver.
Right, exactly. Because I think it's so sad, because I think there's such value in sales, and there's a lot of people out there who view salespeople as people who are really just trying to sell you on something, when in reality it should be about, how can I help other people?
It's the golden rule in a way, isn't it? Actually, I get what I want when I help you get what you want, right? And stay focused on what the customer's needs are. And that's where the intellect comes into play, because you need to understand kind of the business process and what their business pain might be to be able to sort that out. If you have to bring in that pre-sales engineer every single time to every sales call, you're going to be less effective, because they really want to have confidence in you. So it's a great discussion, and I really appreciate what you added to that discussion.
Of course. Thank you. Well, and I'm curious, kind of going further into the mentality of your teams, how do you create a connected team environment within your sales org, when in reality sales can be more of a self-driven game at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I mean, boy, did the pandemic change things, right? We're tired of talking about the pandemic, but I work for a company now, and have really for the last 4 years. So it's been 100% virtual. And so how do you do that? How do you build teams and have a culture where people feel included, even though they're working from home and maybe not having a lot of face-to-face contact? Well, it really starts again with leadership. And I look for those leaders that are underneath me, that are leading my teams, to have the same characteristics and ideals that I aspire to. So I would consider myself to be a very empathetic leader. I really try to engage the hearts of the men and women that are on my team. I don't want to just know about their pipeline. I actually want to know about what's going on in their life, and what are some of the challenges that they might be facing, and showing a genuine care and concern about them as individuals. And I think through the pandemic, that was super important, because we all reacted differently to what was going on with the pandemic. We might have had a family member who was sick. We might have been fearful about the vaccine. No matter where you are in the spectrum of things, it caused us really to get in touch with some of our emotions about what was going on. And so being connected and being an empathetic leader over the past several years has really helped me grow a more cohesive team. I can't imagine, frankly, going into an office every day. As much as I enjoyed being face to face with everyone, I think we've been able to pretty much achieve that same culture being remote. And we do that by, having weekly meetings that are not just about the business. But for example, I started something called to be able to share your corner. And so I'd pick 3 people on the team, and during a monthly meeting, they would take 5 or 10 minutes each to just share what's going on in their life outside of work. And I can't tell you how cohesively that brought the team together. People were just so excited to be able to share, about their family and about their vacations and about what had happened in their life and stuff. It really brought the whole team together. So,
yeah, it sounds like you've been able to create a really cohesive community, which, I think a lot of leaders are struggling with today. And it all comes back to that idea that I know that you and I have talked about before, of servant leadership and leading by example. And by doing that, and being able to step up and be empathetic with your team, it encourages other team members to do that within their own relationships within the team.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the other word that comes to mind is, believe it or not, as a leader, exhibiting some vulnerability at times.
Yeah.
By exhibiting vulnerability, it leads others to be able to be more vulnerable as well, and really helps bring a team together. So
yeah. Well, kind of diving more into the business side of things, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what's maybe one of the most creative ways that you or one of your reps has ever closed a deal?
Gosh, I've got a lot of fun stories. You can imagine. I mean, I've literally closed thousands of deals over my career, but this is kind of an interesting story. So probably the largest beverage bottler in the world. I'll leave that name kind of out of the podcast, but we were competing for a 9-figure deal actually in this organization. 9 figures, 8 figures.
Wow.
An 8-figure deal in this with an incumbent. And after a very long evaluation process, believe it or not, they told us that they were going to stick with the incumbent. It was too risky to move to us. So I asked for a debrief call, and we took about an hour for them to debrief their decision about why they decided to go in this direction. And I heard something on that call that, had we learned in the sales cycle, it would have really changed the game for us. And the challenge was for them, they're going to have to lay off 25 long-term employees of this organization, people that had been with the company anywhere between 20 and 40 years. And nobody had uncovered that during the sales cycle at all. So I marched into my CEO's office, maybe a little bit ashamed that we'd lost the deal. And within about 15 minutes, he's like, well, why don't we just hire those people and make them part of our overall project and initiative with them? And so Saturday morning, I went back, reached out to my executive contact there. He responded within 20 minutes. And they were a little skeptical at first, but as we worked over the next 10 weeks, we won that deal for 160% of what we originally bid it for, away from our competitor.
Wow.
So what are the lessons there? One is, it's never over till it's over. Secondly, we got to ask all the right questions. And I think really what the team missed is they were sitting in our shoes as a vendor, but not sitting in the shoes of our client overall. And also always ask for that debrief call, because you might do something. So, and always involve the executive team. And it was great to be able to bring that to my CEO and not be embarrassed that we lost the deal, but we won and lose as a team. And we were able to really rally around that and win the business. And it was a wildly successful project. And frankly, it led to the sale of our company because of that win to a $4 billion company. So pretty significant. You can probably imagine why that's the first one that comes to mind, right?
Of course. Well, and just going back to what we were talking about of like building trust with the client, you were able to say, hey, I know that you value these people and I know how I value my team. So let's find a way to work together so that we can make your life easier and still support those 25 people who are so important to your organization.
That's right. And it helped streamline the project, right? We didn't lose that intellect as they transitioned to more of a cloud solution from an internal solution. We kept it and retained all that subject matter expertise. So it was a huge win-win all the way around.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a little curious as well, data and analytics are really booming right now. And I'm wondering how you leverage data and analytics in your organization to drive better results for your sales team.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I have to say, I get a little passionate about this because I'm a former engineer, and I'm a data leader for sure. And maybe many people might say I'm a little too hands-on in that regard. I don't rely on my revenue ops team or so forth. They can do all the pretty graphs for the board meetings and all that stuff, but I'm actually doing my own analysis on the pipeline as well. I'm not just relying on third-party tools to do that. And being able to show up every Monday morning for our weekly pipeline calls and really knowing what's happening with the business, not relying on someone else to get me that data, has really made a difference. It's given me credibility with my leadership team, with the board of directors, and I just prefer to be much more hands-on, and I can spot things otherwise. So I really try to tell anyone who's in a sales leadership role, be data-driven. But don't rely just on the third-party products that you have out there. Those are super useful and can give you great insights, but get in touch with the data. Know how to analyze the data and pull your own metrics and so forth. That being said, we use our tools of choice are going to be Salesforce, of course. It is the backbone of the company for me. Everywhere I've gone, I've made it the system of record. It's not NetSuite or ERP system. It's actually Salesforce. In fact, we pay commissions out of the Salesforce system as well. So it has to be the system of record for everything. And of course, I'm intimately familiar to be able to pull reports and do any analysis that I need to do. There's some other great tools out there, I think, that have really become very popular. We're in love with SalesLoft. We love the email cadence that it does, but I also like the pipeline reporting and introspection that it gives. You're starting to see some of these tools kind of merge together and grow in some ways. My other tool of choice is going to be Gong. I love Gong.io. I love being able to listen to calls. I normally, exercise in the morning, and what I do is I spend the 45 minutes or an hour listening to calls, listening to the previous day's sales calls that have happened on my team. And it keeps me in touch with actually what's happening and going on in the organization.
Well, and I think, you mentioned obviously it's so important for leaders to be in the trenches with their own data, because the reality is when you're using a third-party tool, they don't understand necessarily the nuances of your product, your company, your team that you're going to be able to tap into far more than any of those tools are able to.
Yeah, you're right. And I think also being in front of boards of directors and presenting, they have a view of the data that they like to have. They want it clear and understandable, and they don't want all the nuanced details. They just want to understand. So you need to balance both the need to go deep, but also being able to provide them executive level visibility too. So I've come up with some, interesting metrics the board likes to see in terms of pipeline movement and development, ratings on the sales team and how they're performing, how they're coming up to speed and ramping and things like that. So I keep kind of a portfolio of metrics. I keep them up to date on a monthly basis for the board and for our executive leadership team.
That's amazing. Well, and we talked about this a little bit before. Obviously, being an empathetic and servant leader is something that's very, very close to your heart and something that you embody every single day. I'm curious, how do you motivate salespeople who may be experiencing setbacks or are struggling, and what strategies have been effective for you in the past?
Well, what comes to mind, Anna, is, that trust bond that we talked about earlier. I need to have those with my employees. They need to know that I trust them. And then I'm going to add value. And so, my words are not cheap words that are going to fall off the table, but are actually meaningful. So I do that by really listening to the team and what's happening and what's going on in our deals and looking for places that I can add value. I think we've all worked for sales leaders that, frankly, are berating, condescending, arrogant. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in working for a company where that's the sales culture. That doesn't yield good results, in my opinion, overall. If you really dig under the covers, the reason that person is acting that way is because of their own insecurities. It's just not the type of leadership that I aspire to. So I'm going to be very engaged. I'm going to be listening well. I'm going to be looking for opportunities to affirm and encourage when my employees are doing well. And I'm going to also, not publicly in many cases, because I don't believe in reprimanding someone publicly or humiliating them. But if I need to do some correction, we're gonna have a meeting in my office or one-on-one, and we're gonna talk through those issues or areas that I see for improvement. But I'm always going to balance it with encouragement. And I have found that strategy really works to bring out the best in people. Everyone wants to know what they're doing well. And if you're willing to give good advice and to recommend, not just criticize, but actually give them some strategies for resolving maybe their blind spot or the area they need improvement on, you're going to see improvement. And so I try to balance those two things together. Now, does that mean I keep everybody on the team and I don't fire people? No, I've let plenty of people go over the years. Why? Because if they're not aspiring to those 5 attributes that I talked about, they're not men and women of integrity. They're not doing the right thing. They're not exhibiting a strong work ethic. They're not learning the product. They're not a team player across the board. Then they're probably not the right fit for the company and for the team that I'm leading overall. So I look for those people that have those attributes, and I cultivate those attributes over the course of our relationship together.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important because at the end of the day, people work better when they feel safer. So if they feel like they can come to you and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this, and I would really appreciate your insight or your coaching on this, as opposed to going to them and saying, hey, I'm really struggling this, and being met with maybe even a little bit of animosity or arrogance of,
Right.
why can't you figure this out, is going to be so important.
Yes. It is. And it's also, as I mentioned, exhibiting that vulnerability that we talked about earlier. I mean, it doesn't mean to go to my team to say, hey, we've got a board meeting next Tuesday, and I'm a little anxious about this deal that we're presenting because I don't feel like it's far enough along overall. What can we do over the next week to galvanize and make sure that what I'm presenting to the board is going to be an accurate picture? I mean, it's so much different than saying, you're not doing your job and you need to change your ways, and I'm going to give this account to someone else. I mean, which is going to yield the better result?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and as we've been talking about how you build sales teams, I mean, I can imagine you've seen countless people move into sales leadership for the first time, or you've decided to move people into sales leadership for the first time. I'm wondering, what is maybe the most common mistake that you've seen people make when making that transition for the first time?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of organizations promote that incredible salesperson that has those great skills and has a consistent track record of performance, moving them into a leadership role when frankly it's not the right fit for them.
Yeah.
So I really caution and challenge whether or not we're moving people into the right role. I want them to exhibit the leadership characteristics. And one of the first questions I ask is, do you have a heart for mentoring and leading other people and getting them what I call to the best version of themselves? If the answer to that question is no, or not really, or maybe, they're not the right fit, because that is the single most important characteristic for developing people. It's not getting results. It's about developing your people and your team that you've been entrusted to. And so they have to have a heart and a passion for that. I know that's my DNA. That's why I've fallen into sales leadership role, because I know I was made for this overall.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably the biggest thing as well. Next, I want to make sure that we're not putting someone into a position where they can't be successful. Have they led teams before? Do they know how to conduct one-on-ones? Do they know how to lead a team and conduct pipeline reviews, et cetera? And so trying to equip them with the skills and cadence, natural cadence of interactions that you would have to lead a team, et cetera, just equipping them. And then, of course, there's that data-driven aspect, that we talked about earlier. Do they have that? Do they have a passion for that? Do they want to be on top of the numbers and be able to do that?
No, absolutely. And I love that you brought up the, are they equipped to do this? Because I think, when you move from being a salesperson into a leadership role, I can imagine that can be pretty jarring, because you've got a whole host of other responsibilities that you've never really done before, that you've been on the other side of. But now you have to learn how to not only coach your team on how to do what you were doing, but also how to make that role efficient and
Right.
do it well.
Right. And they have to be confident. They have to be confident in their own abilities as well. If they're lacking sort of that confidence and that leadership, it may not be the right role for them either. Another thing I look for is, do they have kind of a teaching mentality as well? Do they like to train other people? Do they like to help people become more efficient? I'm thinking particularly of this gentleman that has worked for me. His name is Brett. I won't give you his last name, but his wife and his wife both had a online business that they were doing, and I was meeting with him and mentoring him month after month, and I'm like, I really think he'd be great in sales, and he had a strong technical background, and so I brought him into the company as a BDR, and he just knocked the cover off the ball. I mean, I love that. I've got dozens of stories like that. Not only did he knock the cover off the ball, he became the leader of that group. And now he's really one of the best BDR managers or lead generation managers that I know in the marketplace today. And this is after about 8 years overall. So looking for those individuals is also another key leadership characteristic. You got to be able to find that diamond in the rough and be able to polish it, so they can shine and go on to do some great things. It's been perhaps the most rewarding part of my job, to be honest, is seeing how many people I've been able to help and get into leadership roles and get into successful careers.
Well, and I think that just speaks to exactly what you were talking about before of like, do you have a heart for mentorship, and can you calibrate what it takes to be on to have a really great team? Do you know what to look for? Do you know how to coach? And just hearing you talk about it like gets me all fired up about it, because I can clearly tell that you're super, super passionate about not only your product, but your team. Yeah. And maybe even more so about your team.
That's right. Yeah. I've just had some tremendous relationships established throughout my sales career, and people that I know I could count on, both personally and not just professionally, but personally as well. It's been incredibly rewarding, Anna.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and being on the podcast. Do you have any other advice or gifts of knowledge that you'd like to share with our viewers before we wrap up?
I don't know. I mean, I think in general, and when I meet with people, I'm so biased because I think sales, high-tech sales in particular, is such a wonderful career overall. I just feel so fortunate that I fell into it. And it's not to say I didn't enjoy my aerospace engineering days that I had overall, but I just love that every day is different, that we can learn new things, that we can help people achieve their goals and objectives overall. And so I think my ending advice is follow your dreams, be courageous, become the best version of yourself. I mean, there's plenty of other people out there like me and you and others that can encourage and equip and help you get to that next level. Find those mentors, find those people that are willing to invest time in you.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And everybody, if you like what Rob or I had to say today, I would highly encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share this with your network or anyone that you feel might benefit from what we had to say today. Again, this is Next in Sales, a Next Level podcast. I'm Anna, and I will see you next week.